Welcome to 4-H Nova Scotia's Youth Safety at 4-H in Canada Leader Training webinar. We truly appreciate the time and dedication our leaders give to the 4-H program. We want to thank you, our volunteers, and acknowledge the excellent job you do providing mentorship to our members and helping them gain lifelong skills. These policies are designed to make what is already a great program even better. By working together, we can make 4-H a leading organization for youth safety well into the future. After completing this training, you will be able to identify the policies outlined in the Youth Safety at 4-H in Canada manual, respond to parent questions about youth safety practices in 4-H, apply the Rule of 2 to club settings and events, recognize the steps in planning safe activities and events, recognize when to report concerns of abuse, misconduct, and safety issues, where to access 4-H Canada policy and resources, as well as how to access provincial procedures and resources. On the right is the 4-H Canada Positive Youth Development Formula. It is our recipe for building responsible, caring, and contributing young people. The 4-H Canada essential elements are the ingredients at the core of the honeycomb. Youth safety is the top priority. The caring leaders in 4-H are creating learn to do by doing activities in safe, fun, and inclusive environments. Look at this picture for a minute. How do you think those members are feeling? Are they having fun? Do they feel safe? We can see that the leaders have asked them to wear life jackets, have taught them how to paddle, and we can assume that a leader is close by in another canoe. How are leaders feeling? Maybe they feel confident because all youth have passed a swim test, have life jackets, and a leader has first aid training. While you may not have called it that before, those are all techniques to manage risk, which our leaders are already employing. When everyone at 4-H pays attention to risk management, youth can feel safe and focus on learning and developing skills. Staff and volunteers feel protected and prepared, and liability exposure is limited. So how does 4-H manage risk to ensure that our youth and leaders are safe? There are three main components of risk management. They include policies that provide best practices such as the Rule of 2 and screening practices for new volunteers, procedures and structures that help manage the organization such as incident reporting. This ensures that issues are resolved and improvements are made. Organizational culture. We are creating an open dialogue about youth safety, creating an environment where it is expected, and leaders are supported to voice concerns. This doesn't mean that all the fun is gone from our program. Remember, fun is listed in our core elements. What this means is that 4-H risk management components are aligned with our mission and allow youth to engage safely in experiential education programs, letting them learn to do by doing. Why do we have this new training program? In 2018, 4-H Canada delivered a risk management report to the provincial boards and executive directors that identified a number of areas where the 4-H movement in Canada needed to be raised to a consistent standard of practice. The diversity of the 4-H program across Canada is something to be celebrated. However, it is also an area of risk, as the content and caliber of youth safety policies, processes, and standards were significantly different across the country. Subsequent reviews by legal counsel recommended improved continuity in standards and practices across the country. With a renewed focus on youth safety, 4-H Canada and its provincial partners worked very hard to implement a consistent policy across Canada through the accreditation process. It aims to provide successful and safe programs for all youth, to safeguard the trust and loyalty of families, and to ensure that leaders have the resources and training to feel supported and prepared. The materials developed to do this include Commit to Kids training, a National Code of Conduct, a National Inclusion Statement, and the Youth Safety at 4-H in Canada Policy Manual, Training, and FAQ sheets. Parents are increasingly aware and making choices based on the caliber of program and youth safety standards. Many youth organizations are facing the same challenges, and recognizing an old school mentality and culture of inconvenience can no longer drive policy and practice. To ensure the long-term success of 4-H, we must have in place industry best standards for youth organizations. 4-H Canada has reviewed the practices of industry experts like Commit to Kids, Kids Help Phone, the Coaching Association of Canada, and other youth organizations such as Scouts Canada, and have used them to develop our policies. A great tool for evaluating if 4-H is meeting industry standards is the checklist for parents on how to choose a child-safe organization. Before choosing to participate in an organization, parents are asking the following types of questions. Does your organization train volunteers about child sexual abuse? Do you have screening and hiring processes for staff and volunteers? And they also look at how risk is managed for activities that could include field trips, swimming, and transportation. A comprehensive review and consultation within the youth industry and with all provincial 4-H organizations resulted in the development of the Youth Safety at 4-H in Canada Policy Manual, which is available online and in hard copy from 4-H Nova Scotia. In addition, this training session is being provided for all staff and leaders in 4-H organizations across Canada. To successfully implement the youth safety policies, it is key that all staff, leaders, and volunteers are provided with the resources to grow their knowledge and skills to be able to follow and apply the policies in their programs. We encourage you to read the Youth Safety at 4-H in Canada document cover to cover, but today we'll focus on just the key youth safety elements. 4-H in Canada now has one consistent spot to look for all of the national youth safety policies and references to the provincial procedures. These include the Code of Conduct, Inclusion Statement, Screening and Training Policy, Youth Supervision Policy, Safety Assessment and Management Policy, Misconduct Reporting Policy, Duty to Report Policy, the Transportation Policy, and Youth Travel Policy and Procedures. As many of these policies refer to your role as a staff member, a leader, or volunteer, it is important that you understand the responsibility required of each of those roles. So let's start with the screening and training policy. The screening and training policy. 1. Adults and older youth in a position of trust within 4-H must complete screening and training requirements before supervising and working with youth. This ensures that they are aware of their responsibilities as caring adults in youth-adult partnerships and in delivering safe and meaningful experiences. It is important to note that anyone attending meetings and interacting with members on a regular basis develop a position of trust with members by being associated with the program. It is important for these people to become screened. 2. Provincial and national offices are required to maintain secure records of all screening and training requirements, either in progress or completed. The screening and training policy recognizes that there are different roles within 4-H which require different levels of screening and training. All trained leaders and screened volunteers are required to complete an application. In Nova Scotia, this is done annually with club registration. New volunteers are required to complete an interview, submit references. In Nova Scotia, 3 are required. The vulnerable sector check and criminal record check, which is done at your local RCMP station, and sign a 4-H Code of Conduct, which is also part of the registration form. In addition to what 4-H Canada requires, Nova Scotia requires a child abuse registry check. This is a letter sent to community services, or the request can be submitted online. The key difference between our trained leaders and screened volunteers is the requirement that trained leaders take additional training, such as this youth safety policy training, Commit to Kids training, and any new leader training which may be developed by 4-H Nova Scotia in the future. The refresher, which is required every 3 years, is one combined training program which is completed online. It is the expectation that the trained leader is responsible for risk management and programming within the club or at an event, while the additional screen volunteers are the extra eyes and ears needed to ensure that the program is delivered safely. The youth supervision policy has 3 components. The rule of 2 protects youth and adults in potentially vulnerable situations. Supervision ratios ensure that there are enough staff, leaders, and volunteers to deliver a safe and meaningful program, and also that there are enough leaders to share the load of planning, leading activities, assisting youth, and being prepared for unexpected situations. Project supervision requirements ensure that at least one leader and one volunteer are registered with the project who are not spouses to ensure that there is no conflict of interest and follows best practice for youth safety. The rule of 2 applies to all 4-H club and project meetings, programming, events, and communications. There must always be a minimum of 2 screened adults, one of whom must be a trained leader, who are not spouses, regardless of the number of youth members in attendance. All trained leaders and screened volunteers have met the interview, reference, and police check screening requirements. Remember, the difference between a trained leader and a screened volunteer is the additional child protection training a trained leader has completed and their responsibility to implement safety and risk management practices. For the protection of all, there must never be a situation where an adult is one-on-one with a youth who is not their child or ward within 4-H meetings, programming, and events. If this occurs, an incident report must be filed. Please note, this report is to document the reason a leader was one-on-one with a member, such as the member was dropped off early and a parent was unable to stay. This provides a record of the situation and is not to get anyone in trouble. The purpose of this policy is to protect youth, members, leaders, volunteers, and staff in potentially vulnerable situations. The goal for 4-H programming is to plan for and achieve the highest green level. Let's watch a short training video that will walk us through how the rule of 2 applies in different situations.
Welcome to 4-H Canada's Youth Safety Training on the Rule of 2. The Rule of 2 is an important policy that helps protect members, volunteers, leaders, and staff in potentially vulnerable situations. It applies to any activity undertaken by 4-H, including meetings, travel, events, and electronic communication with youth members. You can find a full description of the policy in the Youth Safety at 4-H in Canada Policy Manual. With any 4-H programming, activities, or communications, the rule of 2 must be followed. The optimal situation is a minimum of 2 trained leaders for one or more youth, or at least 1 trained leader and 1 screened volunteer. Most important is that a leader or staff member is never alone with the youth. If that situation arises, it must be documented in an incident report. Let's look at some common scenarios of how the rule of 2 applies to a 4-H meeting and communications.
Hi, Katie. You are early for today's meeting. Why don't you head into the barn and start grooming the horses?
As outlined in the rule of 2, an adult leader must never be alone with youth. What could the leader do in this situation?
Hi, Katie. You are early for today's meeting. Can you ask your mom to wait until our other leaders arrive?
Having a parent wait until another leader arrives is a great solution. At the beginning of each club year, it's important to communicate the rule of 2 to all families and youth so that they understand and support the policy. Parents are responsible for transporting youth to meetings and events, and for providing supervision outside of the official program.
Hi, Josh and Mike. What a great idea to bike over for the meeting. Let's wait outside so we can see when the other leaders and club members arrive.
Unexpected situations can arise, but the leader did the right thing by staying in public view when alone with youth. While this was unexpected, the leader must fill out a confidential incident report, just in case any questions arise.
Wow, what a great article on horse grooming. I know Mike just got a new horse and would love this. I'll send him the link.
While it's great to share resources with youth, remember it's not okay to communicate with youth via private messaging or text. Instead, communicate via group emails or chats with all leaders and members included. If communicating by email to youth, use a parent or another leader on all updates and replies. Now let's move to some scenarios common 4-H camps or other overnight accommodations.
Brianna, can I come sit with you? I know it's hard to be at camp when you're missing home.
While the leader has the best intentions to comfort Brianna, being alone in the cabin creates a vulnerable situation. Let's look at some safe options.
Brianna, can I come sit with you? I know it's hard when you're missing home. Sure.
Having two adults enter a private space to check on a youth is the best approach. Ask for permission to come in, and be conscious of the youth's personal space. Let's look at another option for helping Brianna.
Brianna, I know it's hard when you're missing home. Can you come and sit outside with me on the porch? I'd love to hear more about the pets you have at home. Okay.
Asking Brianna to come out into a public setting is a great choice. While still in view of other leaders and members, Brianna and the leader can have a quiet conversation. Leaders may find themselves in a similar situation when breaking into smaller groups in a classroom or at a public event such as a fair. While two leaders continue to oversee the safety of the entire group and have all the emergency contact information, small groups of youth with one leader may circulate in public view. Always keep the rule of two in mind when planning accommodations for a 4-H program. Remember that when at camp or in a hotel for an event, two trained leaders, chaperones, or camp counselors must complete room checks by standing in the doorway and looking in to ensure all the youth are accounted for. Adults should only enter a room if there's an immediate concern about the health or well-being of a member. Remember to always plan your program and activities to meet the green standard in the Rule of Two. For more information on the Rule of Two or any of the youth safety at 4-H in Canada policies, please visit 4-h-canada.ca or reach out to your provincial office.
While the Rule of Two helps to protect youth and leaders, safe supervision ratios are also required in order to deliver a safe and meaningful program with youth. The table outlines the adult to youth supervision ratios for different age groups. The total youth count must include all youth and children who are participating in the program, including 4-H members and any other youth guests who are invited to attend. Younger siblings who may be attending the event with parents are not included in this count, as the parents will be providing supervision for those children. The Rule of Two is always the minimum, and the above ratios also apply to small breakout groups. For a club to be in good standing and to begin hosting sanctioned meetings, programs, or events, there must be a minimum of one trained leader or staff and an additional screened volunteer who are not spouses registered with the club. Spouses may be part of the club leadership team, but there must always be a third trained leader or screened volunteer present. This requirement is in place to ensure that the Rule of Two can be followed, to protect all parties, and to prevent any conflict of interest that may arise in the event of financial or other misconduct. General leaders must ensure that each project or activity, such as tug of war and lumber sports, within their club also meets these standards. The club leader registration must be on file with 4-H Nova Scotia, and it will be reviewed each club year. Clubs may not hold registration until the Rule of Two is met. 4-H Nova Scotia appreciates the knowledge and enthusiasm brought to projects by spousal teams or other family combinations. 4-H Nova Scotia hopes this continues with the addition of another trained leader or screened volunteer at project meetings. We want our members to have an unbiased adult to communicate any issues or incidents to, and do not want to place any leader in an awkward position of needing to file an incident report on a family member. Let's jump ahead to the transportation policy, as there are typically a lot of questions on how to apply the rule of two. Transportation is not part of a leader's role. Parents and guardians are responsible for transporting youth to and from 4-H meetings and events, and for ensuring that 2 trained leaders or screened volunteers are present before departing. Personal travel is not considered part of the 4-H program. Families who wish to arrange to carpool with other families do so at their own risk and should review their personal automobile insurance. This often leads to the question, can a leader drive a family friend that is also a 4-H member on their own? In short, a leader may do so with the understanding that it is in his or her role as a family friend and not as a 4-H leader, nor as part of the 4-H program, and it would not be covered by 4-H insurance. Travel as a club to a sanctioned event is considered to be part of the 4-H program and is insured if the commercial transportation or carpooling is documented in an activity plan. It is reviewed and approved by the provincial 4-H office and is shared with parents in advance. The rule of two would apply in each vehicle. This means there are 2 trained leaders, screened volunteers, or parents in each vehicle transporting youth, and the driver must be over 21. The age of 21 is a requirement to ensure that the driver is at least 4 years older than the youth they are supervising and they have an appropriate amount of maturity and driving experience. We will talk more about activity plans on coming slides. Typically, the youth travel policy applies to members attending 4-H Canada organized programs or when a member is representing 4-H Nova Scotia at a national event. In Nova Scotia, this could be the Royal Beef or Dairy Team, Young Speakers for Agriculture, or a club-to-club exchange, for example. In these cases, youth may travel alone by air, train, or bus to meet with a group to attend a 4-H event or program. For interprovincial, national, or international events. When selected nationally or provincially to represent 4-H at a conference or event hosted by another organization. These travel arrangements must be shared with youth and their parents or guardians well in advance, and permission forms must be signed and returned to the program organizers. When youth are received at their destination, the program will commence and the supervision policies will apply. Please refer to the policy in the Youth Safety at 4-H in Canada document for additional guidelines on traveling as a group and if one of your club members requests independent travel before or after the event. The Safety Assessment and Management Policy states that staff and trained leaders are responsible for conducting program safety assessments, activity plans, and implementing preventative procedures that follow all policies and guidelines. For coordinating the management of participants' health during 4-H activities, which includes forms, first aid, and an emergency response plan. Activities that abide by all policies are sanctioned 4-H events and have insurance coverage for youth, leaders, volunteers, staff, and invited guests. It is important to work within the 4-H guidelines to ensure that you are not taking on any personal liability. So what does that last statement about sanctioned events mean? While 4-H does not have a list of banned or excluded activities, provincial organizations have project newsletters and club resources that include safety practices for different types of activities. Leaders are expected to follow industry best practices for instance, youth wearing helmets while riding horses. If you have a new idea for an activity or project, be sure to discuss it with your provincial 4-H organization first to ensure that you are implementing reasonable safety practices and are not taking on any personal legal responsibility. There are 4 different policies that cover the 4-H organization across Canada. Accident insurance provides financial relief to staff, leaders, and youth if an injury or illness occurs during a sanctioned event. However, expenses must be claimed through private insurance first. There is a general liability policy which protects 4-H and leaders against claims from third parties during a sanctioned event. For example, if a youth or leader damages a farm gate at a 4-H meeting. The director and officer liability policy protects leaders, directors, officers, and the organization for claims alleging a wrongful act. There is protection from these threats whether they have merit or not. For example, a claim about mismanagement of organization funds. The abuse policy protects the 4-H organization against financial loss due to claims of abuse by staff, leaders, or youth. What is not covered? Livestock. The responsibility for animal livestock coverage always rests with the animal's owner. Personal vehicle damage. It must be insured by the vehicle owner. And COVID-19 or other viral illnesses. An overview of the 4-H Canada insurance policy is available on the 4-H Nova Scotia website or in hard copy. It provides many clear examples of what is and isn't covered and is an excellent resource for leaders to review. Completing a formalized activity plan is a new process at 4-H across Canada. You can think of it as a field trip form that might come home from a school or camp. It is a tool for guiding those that are planning activities and events to review the different youth safety policies and have a standardized form for sharing that information with the provincial organization and then with participants and families. When leaders and families are all on the same page about transportation, supervision roles, and the activities involved, the program will run more smoothly in a safe, inclusive, and fun environment. Across Canada, an activity plan is required for any 4-H activities that include a multi-club or regional event, such as a rally or tour. However, in Nova Scotia, we do not need these for regular project meetings, which include members from more than one club. They are needed if an activity includes 4-H organized transportation or accommodations. Transportation also includes a vehicle pulling a float in a parade. If they involve high-risk activities, such as skiing, water sports, lumber sports, or shooting sports. If there are third service providers who require a waiver. This may be if you attend an archery or shooting range or go to a trampoline park. 4-H Canada has launched a web-based activity plan platform that will allow the trained leader to complete an online activity planning form. This form can be accessed through the 4-H Canada or 4-H Nova Scotia website. It is also available in a printed form or PDF from 4-H Nova Scotia. When submitted, it will be directed to 4-H Nova Scotia for review, and they will return the approved activity plan as a PDF to be shared with participants and families. Clubs should submit their activity plans at least 2 weeks before they plan to start promoting an event. Let's look quickly at what the online form looks like. A detailed user guide is available for reference on the 4-H Nova Scotia website, and we recommend reviewing it before you start to ensure that you have all the necessary information gathered. Online, this form must be completed in one session. When you select your provincial organization, it ensures that the form will be sent to the 4-H Nova Scotia administration staff as soon as you submit it. Each section will provide instructions on what to fill in. This form will guide leaders through questions which should be considered when planning an event. These include the supervision ratio, the names of the leaders and volunteers providing supervision, the number of participants, the civic address of the location, and start and end times. It also includes information on any costs, waivers that are needed, transportation and accommodations, as well as emergency planning information. Answering all of these questions will ensure that all standards are being met for youth safety. It is important to have all your information gathered when you start the form because clicking the green button at the top submits the form. There is not an option to save and proceed. The final step on the form is to attach any files and add the parties. These are the people who are involved. At minimum, it must list the trained leader organizing the activity, and this is the person who will receive an email confirmation when the activity is approved. 4-H Nova Scotia staff reviews the event plan and can make notes on the activity form and will be able to contact the leader for clarification if needed. The final approved form should be shared with parents. While the hope is that your event or program runs smoothly, incidents can arise, and it's important to know how to address them and where to turn for assistance. An issue that can be easily remedied in the moment, such as a scrape, a bump, or an upset tummy, or something that's broken that can be easily repaired or is a maintenance issue, does not require an incident report. Your first aider should be keeping a log of basic treatments and updating parents. Property owners should be informed of any basic damage or maintenance required. Anything more major than those examples requires an incident report. This ensures that the provincial organization has the information needed to activate insurance, support anyone who is injured, and review preventative procedures. If in doubt, it's always best to make a report to ensure that the information is recorded in case questions arise. The other key form in the Youth Safety Reporting Platform is the 4-H Incident Report. This online incident report is available on the 4-H Canada and 4-H Nova Scotia websites, with hard copies and PDFs also available upon request. At the top, you'll select the 4-H Incident Report form at the top of the page. Then select your organization. Like the activity planning form, use the various drop-downs and text boxes to complete information about the incident. You can add information about the participant involved, the trained leader, and any other key witnesses as parties on the form. Upload any key documents or photos of the incident, and the trained leader who submits the form will receive an email confirmation after submission. Once you submit an incident report, which is the top blue step in this flowchart, it will be reviewed and managed by your provincial organization. Typically, with safety concerns, the flow will follow the minor incident column. Provincial staff will contact the parties involved, connect with insurance, and report to 4-H Canada if required. Support will be provided to those involved and the incident reviewed to determine if preventative steps could have been taken. This may lead to new training or updates to procedures. We'll look more closely at the serious incident flow as we discuss misconduct concerns. The Code of Conduct is your guide to interacting with youth, families, and other leaders, and is also how you should expect to be treated as a leader. If concerning behavior arises, the Code of Conduct is the organization's tool for documenting incidents, determining consequences, and implementing change. It applies to everyone involved in 4-H. Youth, families, and leaders are required to sign and review it every year. It states there is no tolerance for conduct that conflicts with the Code of Conduct for 4-H in Canada or other supporting policies. And any incidents of misconduct by a youth, member, leader, volunteer, staff, 4-H family member, or guest must be reported to the provincial organization as outlined in the misconduct reporting policy. As a leader, you are required to complete an incident report for behaviors that are considered misconduct. We'll talk about that misconduct policies and procedures later in the training. The Code of Conduct. It outlines that everyone will represent 4-H and themselves in a positive way by being kind and respectful, following fair play rules, positive representative of 4-H, by caring for your animals and abiding by all local laws. We also want to promote a safe, inclusive, and fun environment. To do this, everyone is part of creating a culture of safety. There are no drugs or alcohol at any youth events. We want to encourage inclusion and positive youth development. Leaders should be leading by example. This includes implementing and adhering to all policies and procedures, being positive, and encouraging teamwork and collaboration. For staff and leaders, everyone needs to fulfill their duties, act within their roles, and keep information private. Leaders are provided contact and medical information which they require for their current members. This information must be held securely and disposed of at the end of the 4-H year. The 4-H inclusion statement states that 4-H in Canada is open to all, without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. It is important that any accommodations, changes, or exceptions will be assessed on an individual basis, taking into account the individual experience of the member and their family. Safety is a top priority. Leaders are encouraged to work with individuals and their families to identify and discuss accommodations which are required and to reach out to the provincial or national office to help with any concerns. As a trained leader, we need to work with youth and families to make appropriate accommodations to allow for participation. We need to make sure we're not bringing any personal biases into a 4-H meeting and speak up if we witness discrimination. This may involve mediating conversations between members and adults. Promote an environment where youth, families, and other leaders can speak up. The misconduct reporting policy is an open-door policy for reporting concerns of misconduct, harassment, and abuse. Reports may be made by anyone, including youth, leaders, and parents. Leaders and staff are required to complete an incident report. Provincial organization will oversee investigation, consequences, communication, and appeals. As a youth-serving organization, 4-H is committed to ensuring youth and leader safety and preventing incidents or repeat incidents through education and development of skills for youth and leaders. 4-H will strive for positive outcomes through coaching and mentoring before considering stricter consequences. But in the case of severe misconduct, 4-H may make suspensions or even terminations. Let's come back to this chart which was shared earlier. At the top, it notes the steps to take if there is suspicion of abuse or if a child is in harm's way. These concerns must always be reported to authorities and to 4-H using an incident report if there has been misconduct by a 4-H member or leader. More serious reportable issues include inappropriate behavior and misconduct or repeated conflict and behavior concerns. These are reported using the same online or hard copy incident report used for accidents. Non-reportable incidents are those that can be worked out fairly quickly at the local level with discussion and coaching with no lingering issues. These may be expected youth behaviors or conflict and misunderstanding, even among adults. With more serious incidents or misconduct, the provincial organizations will work through the steps in the second column of the flowchart. They will conduct an investigation to verify facts of the incident and appoint a committee to determine consequences and hear appeals. As with any incident, a review will help to determine if any policy or procedure changes are needed to improve on youth safety. Now we're going to move into a true or false section. True or false number 1. Younger 4-H participants, 6 to 10 years, are most at risk of abuse by a teacher or volunteer. This is false. Almost 70% of those abused were in high school. Teens are vulnerable and may experience more inappropriate advances or abusive behaviors. We must be vigilant in protecting all youth and children. True or false number 2. Strangers are the perpetrators of 1 in 5 violent offenses against children and youth. True. Statistically, children or youth are abused by someone they know. The rule of 2 is an important tool we can put in place to reduce the vulnerable situations with children and youth and reduce the opportunity for abuse to occur. This includes not only physical situations, but online as well. True or false number 3. Youth living outside a metropolitan area are at a higher risk of family and non-family violence. This is true. Children and youth living in smaller cities, towns, and rural areas are at a higher risk of both family and non-family violence based on police-reported data from 2010. We must be aware of the indicators and be prepared for members to disclose. You can draw on this youth safety training, commit to kids, and then reach out to your province for support. Over 83% of participants in the 4-H program in Canada live outside of urban areas. Children and youth in 4-H are vulnerable, and as leaders, we need to recognize when young people may need support. True or false number 4. There is an equal balance of sexual offenses against males and females. False. Females accounted for 75% and males only 25% of victims in a 2018 study from the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. Over 60% of participants in the 4-H program are female. True or false number 5. An effective measure of risk is to review a person's standing in the community or likability. False. Being well liked or good with kids does not equate to being ethical or trustworthy. 4-H has police screening, interview, and reference check processes in place to ensure that we are following best practices in vetting all staff, leaders, and volunteers. Those statistics that came up in the quiz unfortunately show that our 4-H youth and our communities are not immune to abuse and violence against youth and children. In 2018, the study from the Canadian Centre for Child Protection made preventative recommendations to school authorities around accountability, assessing and managing risk, and educating staff about abuse. At 4-H, we have included these best practices in updated policies and have rolled out the Commit to Kids training. Thank you for being a part of this training, as it can make a difference. The key recommendations were a policy for reporting and addressing of inappropriate interactions, assurance of concerns being kept confidential, and 4-H Nova Scotia wants to be a leading organization by creating a safe and trusting environment where concerns can be reported without fear. At 4-H, the Code of Conduct outlines the expectations and guidelines for everyone involved in 4-H activities, and that we will be vigilant in ensuring an environment that is safe and protects youth, leaders, volunteers, and staff from emotional, physical, verbal, and sexual abuse. The Duty to Report and Misconduct policy outlines the procedures for reporting incidents and how they will be addressed swiftly and in a confidential manner so that the reporter can have confidence in this process. Everyone has a duty to report child abuse and neglect under Canadian child welfare laws. You are obliged to report child maltreatment if you know or suspect it is occurring. This is called the duty to report. Every person in Canada has the duty to report known or suspected child maltreatment to authorities by law. As a youth-serving organization, 4-H has made the Commit to Kids training on abuse prevention a requirement for being a trained leader to ensure that our organization is prepared to uphold this duty. If you suspect a child is at harm, report it immediately to Child Protection Services. Remember, I would rather report and be wrong than not report and be right. In Nova Scotia, this report is made to the Community Services Office in your area. It is important to note that you are not required by law to file a report with 4-H Nova Scotia on sexual abuse situations. That investigation is always handled by the authorities. However, a confidential incident report citing misconduct will prompt 4-H Nova Scotia to take timely action in the protection of members. Like the incident reporting flowchart, there are procedures for reporting concerns of a child being at harm or that has been abused. Incidents must always be reported to the authorities first. Then complete a confidential incident report to ensure that the concern and your steps have been documented. Authorities will independently investigate in parallel to steps taken within 4-H if necessary. If warranted, youth, leaders, or staff may be suspended from 4-H during this time. After authorities share the outcome of their investigation, 4-H will make final determinations, which may include the termination from the organization. Grounds for termination are listed in the misconduct policy. An appeals process is available within 4-H, and in consultation with authorities, 4-H youth safety procedures will be reviewed and updated as needed. That brings us to the end of our presentation on youth safety at 4-H in Canada policies. We have reviewed the Code of Conduct, the Inclusion Statement, the Screening and Training Policy, the Youth Supervision Policy, Safety Assessment and Management Policy, Misconduct Reporting Policy, Duty to Report, Transportation, and Youth Travel Policy and Procedures. We hope you now feel comfortable with the Youth Safety at 4-H in Canada policies. To gain more comfort in applying these policies at the club level, you are encouraged to review case studies and the frequently asked questions available from 4-H Nova Scotia. Thank you for your attention throughout this presentation. The information shared will improve leader and member experience going forward. If at any time you have questions, please reach out to 4-H Nova Scotia at info@4hnovascotia.ca or speak directly with your regional program coordinator. We are in this together and we will have great success if we all move forward in the same direction.